How's it going, everybody? I'm Michael.
This is Wesley.
We're here with Decades of Duel to tell you guys about our September 2011 format tournament upcoming. We want to give you guys a lowdown on the tier list and some very important cards that you will want to think about when you go into building your deck for the tournament.
So essentially this video is for those people who are very unfamiliar with the format, not really sure what's good, what's not good, what are the key cards, what are the key decks, and this is what that video is for. So the first screen we're going to look at is a lot of the key cards, key engines, and key support for most of the strategies you'll see in the format. So Michael, you want to take it away?
We're going to start off with Reborn Tengu and Tour Guide. These cards are very great for creating advantage on board and consistently having board presence. Cards like Reborn Tengu work very well in synchro strategies to give yourself a consistent level 4 on the board to continue synchroing with. Tour Guide grabs Sangan. Sangan grabs a lot of the most important cards in the format, like all the plant cards, a lot of your hand traps and stuff like that. Then we'll move on to Thunder King, being one of the most powerful normal summons in the format, having a 1900 threshold, which is very hard to beat with a normal summon, and 2 very powerful abilities. We have cards like Cyber Dragon and Grand Mole, which are very good summonable outs to cards like Thunder King, Gachi Gachi, Stardust Dragon. Well, not Stardust for Cyber Dragon, but very good summonable one-card outs to powerful cards.
Alright, so next spot we got the hand traps of format. We got Gores, Tragodia, Maxi, and Effect Failure. All played in multiples. Gores obviously limited to 1 and Trag at 2. So Gores and Trag kind of warp the format. You'll find a lot of times not being able to answer certain these if they're dropped on a certain attack. So you might find yourself maybe not wanting to attack in certain scenarios. And then as well as perhaps you have an awkward draw, things aren't really going according to plan, you could potentially bluff those cards and maybe give yourself an extra couple turns to potentially draw out of it for your opponent fearing you dropping Gores.
Maxi and Effect Veiler are very important stereotypical hand traps for the format. Maxi is very good at stifling your opponent, and generally your opponent's never going to give you more than 1 to 2 draws off of it, just to kind of stabilize themselves before they pass it back to you, because they don't want to give you card advantage or the chance to draw into cards like Effect Veiler, Gores, and Tragodia. And Effect Veiler is very powerful against a lot of the normal summons in this format. This format is very normal summon heavy and dependent. So cards like Effect Veiler can work really well at pretty much putting your opponent in position to where they go summon 1 monster and pass. And it outs a lot of the more powerful abilities in the game, like BLS, Chaos Sorcerer, JD, all those cards. So it's very good to put your opponent on the on hold.
Right, so last 2 months we're going to talk about BLS and his little brother Chaos Sorcerer. BLS is so powerful, it just got unbanned for this format. A lot of decks will stretch the consistency in order just to force this card into the deck, because it is honestly, just that powerful and a win condition of itself. So next, the spells. We're going to fly through the spell and traps pretty quickly. They're all pretty self-explanatory, but all these powerful limited to 1 spells that if your deck can play them, you should. We have Monster Reborn, Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, Pot of Avarice, Book of Moon, Mind Control, Foolish Burial, 1-for-1, Allure of Darkness. If your deck can play them, they should be in your deck.
Agreed. And then we have a lot of the more niche cards that are used for more... These cards are not limited in any sense, and they can use to either empower the consistency of your deck or help you to push through certain board states. Cards like Pot of Duality will enhance your consistency. MST, Smashing Ground, Soul Taker, and Econ are all good ways to play with the board and spell variety. Moving on to the traps, we have some of the more powerful traps being Solemn Warning, Solemn Judgment, Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, and Dust Shoot. All 5 of these traps, generally, if you have the space for those 5, you want to be playing them. All of them are very good in just about every situation in the format.
So the rest of the traps, so kind of like the lower tier traps, that if your main engine is not as powerful and requires more defense to support it, like a bunch of stun decks, we have Dimensional Prison, Bottomless Trap Hole. Even further past that, we have cards like Compulsory Evacuation Device, Call the Haunted, Fiendish Chain, and Skill Drain. And then the last 2 cards are going to be Starlight Road and Dark Bribe, which is what those heavy trap decks are often playing a few copies of to protect against power cards such as Heavy Storm,
Dark Hole,
Black Rose Dragon. Basically anything that would wipe most of your field, because as a stun deck you're committing most of your cards to the board.
A lot of the standard Xyz, there's very small pool. There's a very small pool of Xyz in this format, but a lot of the more standout ones are rank 3s being Leviair and Leviathan Dragon. These cards you'll see in every deck that plays Tour Guide. You have Utopia and Roach being the best rank 4s.
Believe it or not, Utopia is the best rank 4 in the format.
Agreed. And on a lower totem scale, you'll have cards like Gotchi Gotchi being played often. For synchros, the most common synchros you'll be seeing are cards like Formula Synchron, Armory Arm, Catastor, Hyper Librarian, Bryanak, Black Rose, Stardust Dragon, Scrap Dragon, and the most powerful one of all being Trishula. As far as fusion goes, there's not too many stereotypical fusions that you're going to see in a lot of different decks, but the one that transitions multiple decks is Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon in combination with Cyber Dragon to out a lot of those more powerful machine strategies. So these are a lot of the cards you want to be looking out for to either include into your deck or play around when you're looking at metagaming against other people's decks. We're going to move into the tier list now. So for our tier 1 decks, we have the Billy Break Plant deck, which is the most powerful deck in the format. Most versatile, very consistent. It can do a lot with nothing, and is very good at breaking boards and retaining advantage at the same time through cards like Tengu and Tour Guide, Dandelion, and you get to play all the most powerful spells and all the most powerful traps. You have Agents.
So I'll take this one. So we got Agents, very stable, has lots of big boss monsters and very hard-hitting threats. Very similarly, we have Dark World, which in 2011, this deck was very undiscovered and underperforming due to it not being solved yet. And when we get to the deck list here in a minute, the list we have provided is very, very similar to the 2012 winning YCS Long Beach deck list, which has every card in it was legal for the 2011 format. We basically just added a Trap Dust Shoot to it.
So these 3 decks are the most powerful, we think, in the format.
Most stable, most consistent.
And have the most easy one-card plays that will gain you the most advantage. Moving on to Tier 1.5, which these are the middling decks that we think are good enough to outpace all other decks, but have to really try hard against the Tier 1 decks.
Alright, so we got TG Stun, Karakuri, and Gravekeeper. So we got Gravekeeper and TGs being the premier stun control decks of the format. And then we have Karakuri, which kind of does a little bit of everything, kind of like Tengu Plant does, just a little less good. It's just the big thing about this deck is that you get to play 6 Stratos, you get to play Pot of Duality, you can play multiple traps while your deck can still OTK out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to Tier 2, we have decks like Mystic Piper Chaos, X-Sabers, Infernities, Light Swarms, because JD is still a card and it's very powerful, and Machina Gadget being a very consistent deck that can output a lot of damage at once.
Cards like Ultimate Offering were still legal in this format and very underplayed and underutilized.
Agreed.
So moving on, after these decks, we have the more rogue decks. They're all still very viable in the hands of the correct pilot, but it is much more of an uphill battle when you're playing against these higher tier decks. But they all have their own little avenues of plays and different things they can do that other decks can't play.
Mm-hmm. So we have Gladiator Beast, we have Blackwing, some classic decks that have some cards taken away from them, but they're still powerful and consistent enough to be played and win games. We have Worms, which is a very good tempo control deck, as well as Hero Beat. We have Frog Monarch and Lancer Frogs, which are very stable decks, but sometimes it's very hard to push through. We have Dragoonity, which is a very good combo deck, but sometimes can be outed a little too easily. Mm-hmm. We have Scraps, which is a nice tempo kind of control deck that can explode sometimes. And then we have Malefic Skill Drain, which this deck is pretty much entirely stun-based with big beat sticks, and it really relies on powerful monsters and powerful trap cards.
So if none of these appeal to you, we have a category we just label as fun. So these decks are very inconsistent for the most part. They're a bit unstable. They do have some very powerful plays, but all in all, they're mostly glass cannons. And don't expect to win too many games with it, but at the same time, they do have the powerful enough plays to win some games, even against some higher tier decks. So we have Zombies, we have Six Samurai, we have Big Fish OTK, Morphtronics, because sometimes you just roll a 6.
Yep.
Flame Veil, which kind of is the worst version of TGs, and some other stun decks got kind of power crept. It was very popular in 2010. We got Nordics and Fableds.
Moving on, we have some decks that are playable and viable, but we would rather you keep them out of the tournament. We have decks like Final Countdown, Chain Burn, Exodia, and Empty Jar.
That's all we're going to say about those.
We're going to give you an overview of these top 3 decks that we talked about earlier, so you have a general idea of the highest point of the metagame you'll be working against when you're creating your deck. Wesley, you want to talk about plants?
Yeah, so obviously there's only 4 actual plant cards, so it's kind of weird for a lot of you seeing like, why is it a plant deck? Because basically it is a pile of the most powerful generic cards that we're talking about prior, as well as your plant engine, which goes very well with your Tengus and Tour Guide. So we got 3 Tengu, 3 Tour Guide plus your Sangan, and 2 Thunder King. So these are all 9 incredibly good turn 1 normal summons. We got a Spirit Reaper. We got the 5-card plant engine. So we got Lone Fire, Dandelion, Spore, Bulb, and Debris Dragon. We got our hand traps we're talking about. We got Triple Max C, Veiler, Gores. Then we have 2 Caius, just because a lot of your cards are floaters. You have a lot of leftover monsters lying on the board. And Caius is a very versatile answer that can basically answer anything. And then, of course, the hard-hitting BLS.
We got the Spell Trifecta, a lot of the more powerful one-of spell cards jammed in here. 2 enemy controllers just for a little more control during the battle phase and to get over a lot of those bigger monsters sometimes. MST for some of your opponent's back row, and then the 5 most powerful traps we can play besides Mirror Force.
And we're not going to go over the extra deck because it's basically all the most powerful extra deck cards available plus a few extra cards. The only thing that really stands out that I'm going to mention is just Orient Dragon. Just answers any synchro such as Stardust or anything larger than it. So moving on to next deck, we got Agents. I'm going to do this one really quick. We got 3 Venus, 3 Earth, 1 Jupiter, 3 Shine Ball for your Agent package. We got your big hard-hitting fairy monsters such as Hyperion, Christia, and then the limited one Honest. We got the Tour Guide engine yet again. We got some Birdmans to help combo with your Venus. We have other powerful hand traps. So we got Gores, Double Trag, Double Maxi, Double Veiler. And then the spells and traps are a lot minimal because this is a much more monster-focused deck. We got 3 Duality, 3 MSTs, the Trifecta spells, and the Lonely Trap Dust Shoot. So this list is the 2nd place YCS in 2011 in Canada, minus 2 cards. The only difference I'd made was I took out the 3rd Veiler and the 1 Chaos Sorcerer he was playing for just 2 Maxis. It's like Maxis very important in this mainly a monster deck, especially complementing the Tragodia for bigger hands. And then the one thing that sticks out in the Agent extra deck is you get to play a lot more fringe cards like Gachi Gachi, which can stall the game and boost your board. And then a very powerful card in Ancient Sacred Wyvern, which helps OTK out of nowhere.
Alright, we're going to move on to Dark World. So this deck, like we said, was a very unsolved deck in the metagame at the time, but in hindsight we realized that the deck has everything it needs to be good, and it's still very powerful, and just right on par with Agents. This deck really focuses on controlling your opponent's hand, making sure you know what they're going to do and when, and poking at your opponent's board while hitting them with big beat sticks. So we got the 1 beige, triple brow, triple grapha, 1 silva, triple snow, and then we play the 1 morphing jar and 2 tour guides. You don't want to play a lot of cards that are not Dark Worlds, so 2 tour guides is enough to get you to brow to summon grapha. We have our power cards and Allure of Darkness, card destruction, the Heavy Storm and Reborn, and Foolish Burial for your grapha. We have one of the more powerful cards in the deck being Dragged Down in the Grave, being able to look at your opponent's hand. Like we said, Trap Dust Shoot's very important for that reason, gives you a lot of game knowledge. Drag Down does the same thing, as well as Mind Crush and Deck Devastation. The deck plays 3 Upstart Goblins because you're just worried about cycling through your deck, as well as 3 Reckless Greeds. You play your 2 Power Traps and being Judgment and Torrential. Your extra deck almost doesn't matter in this deck. You're only really making your rank 3s off of Tour Guide if you have to, and most of the time that's going to be Leviair, but the deck does get a lot of cool access to things like Adrius and Tyrus, having access to cards like Grinosaurus and Trish if you can make it. The deck really doesn't make anything with its extra deck other than rank 3s unless you're using Reborn.
So that may seem a little odd having this entire toolbox just for your one Monster Reborn, but if you don't need those cards necessarily, you might as well just have all these other options for the off chance you do need them. So what people were doing wrong in early 2011, they weren't playing as many draw cards. People were doing limited amounts of dealings. Not many people. No one was playing Upstart Goblin. Not everyone was playing Reckless Greed. So in our list, some arguable changes you can make. Well, there's no Dark Hole. Well, we feel as there's a lot of power. All these decks in tier lists are all subjective. So you can definitely make any changes you want. Like you could add a Dark Hole and Skill Drain in this deck and take out a couple other cards. But
we like to see this as our favorite format, and that's why we're choosing to host the tournament for this first. The reason being is the format's very wide open and very accommodating to decks you may like that you think may not be as powerful as other decks, but still have a chance to win because of the position the format is in. So if your deck that you like isn't on this tier list, do not think it's bad. Just understand that this is our subjective view of the format and what we think is playable and good.
And as you see, we're not going over every deck so far with an example, but in the links below to our Discord, join us. That's where you'll be able to sign up for the tournament. And we'll also have every single deck that we've mentioned in our tier list. We will have at least one example of that deck available for you. So if you're more interested in playing your hero deck, you're more interested in playing your Karakuri deck, we definitely have a good example for you, a good starting point, so you're not left completely unaware of how to build your deck.
We have a great community of players within the Discord. If you have any questions or you just want to ask for suggestions or give us suggestions, be sure to leave them there or down in the comment sections below. Other than that, we'd like to thank you for watching the video and thank you for at least looking in and trying to attend the tournament, and we hope to see you there.